Welcome to the Lugnuts Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Lugnuts Podcast. On this episode, we take you deep into the mind of a car addict and learn that British cars aren't unreliable, they're labor-intensive. Tonight, we have Andrew Frink, live to the world. We have Andrew Frink, car guy, musician, tech guy, all of the above. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey, happy to be here.
Thanks for coming on the Lugnuts Podcast.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your story?
Well, but way back when the olden days came across west of Utah. So now I'm
Mississippi.
Yeah, west of the Mississippi. First time I came out to a square state. I tell you, it was quite a place. So my first word was car.
Really?
So yes,
Wow.
or at least so goes the family lore. I wanted to be a car when I grew up.
Oh.
So my mom figured I was going to become some kind of great car designer, but that takes skill that I don't have. So I stuck to music and eventually technology as a way to not starve to death.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah,
Zach.
I do. Yeah.
So yeah, and it started with one car and then another and then a motorcycle, and here I am now with a hangar full of things. And
So tell us a little bit, besides being a car guy, you are a musician. So tell us a little bit about that and kind of how you have kept the car thing in your life, despite the fact that you also have, obviously, a healthy obsession for instruments.
yeah, and the music thing has been handy. So I actually have a music degree from way back when. And I've then used that to actually play professionally, play guitar, mandolin, and bass, and write and sing and all that kind of stuff. And for the most part, it has funded my car hobby. So that's been the extra few dollars that come in that help to pay for parts and cars. And until recently, that was my full sole source. It's part of how you get that by the rest of the family finance. If I can say, hey, I've got this other stream that I work extra for, that allows me to pay for the stuff.
Pay no attention to what's going on over here. Pay attention to the money that's coming in over here.
That's right.
But it's also interesting. I think this is interesting that you're a musician, by training, by college, but you became a coding guy. You became a tech guy. Give us the connection on that. How did that happen?
To be brutally honest, I needed a job, and I was starting to figure out this web stuff back when I'm old enough that there was a time when I remember when this web stuff was all new.
You remember card catalogs, don't you?
Yes, I remember card catalogs. I remember having to cross-reference. I am in fact that old now, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, I got a temp job somewhere, and they said, hey, could you do this website stuff? Sure, I could figure that out. And I had a couple of programming classes in college before I wised up and switched to music. So I had kind of a foundation, and then got a job here, got a job there, and talked my way into a couple of interviews, and eventually got hired on where I am now with a public school district, working as a web guy. And one thing led to another, and now I run that department.
Well, that's impressive.
I bet you hire amazing people.
We hire great people.
Thanks.
Well, okay, let's just jump right into your car life.
What was your first car?
So my first car, the first car I learned to drive on was a 80. I'm going to get that date wrong. Chevy Celebrity, an automatic and a 4-cylinder.
Okay.
Wow.
It didn't even have the roof rack on the top because we were too cheap to buy the roof rack.
Okay.
It was a thing, but it did have a bench seat, which had its own set of advantages, and it was a station wagon.
Yeah.
So there were certain advantages for the youthful endeavors.
Being 16. Yeah.
Yes, a handy thing. And I learned to drive a stick on my dad's, I think it was an 84 Ford Escort station wagon.
Mm-hmm.
Much to my chagrin, we're in the school parking lot, and I'm trying to get it going and can't get it going. And a friend of mine in their automatic is driving around and around, and I feel like an idiot. Finally, my dad's like, "Are you actually in first or in third?" Yeah, third gear. So after that, let me tell you, first, no problem. And I am proud to say I think I've only owned 3 cars with an automatic transmission since.
Long live
Kudos.
Not a fan.
Save the manuals. Save the manuals.
I am not, unless you're stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
That's it, really. Unless you're stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
Or physically can't drive it. I have yet to drive an automatic that I like, ever.
So you had the Chevy, and then
Chevy, and then this Ford Escort. That's the cars I had growing up. And then my parents are kind of a Ford family, so a number of Ford Escorts over the years. And when I moved out here, my parents gave me their 1990 Ford Escort station wagon with a 5-speed.
Oh,
Nice.
And I owned that for almost a year before I went down the deep dark hole of, ooh, that looks interesting. And I bought a rusty 76 Land Cruiser. I think it was the first time I ever made my mom speechless.
Oh,
Because she had no concept. I mean, she knew I was a car guy, but here's this great, fully functioning car, baby, 90,000 miles. Like, could have driven it for years, cheap, paid for.
yeah.
And I switched it for something that leaked in and out and didn't always get me to work. And thus began. So my second car was an enthusiast car of its own weight.
And that was your daily driver.
That was my daily driver. It was the only car I owned.
Well, that's commitment,
Yeah. Well, and it helped. I worked at a wood shop at the time, and we had a forklift, so we could take the top off in the summer because the top on those is steel.
Oh.
So it was fork
Quite
legs
heavy.
under, hugely heavy. We stuck it on a pallet in the back, and I still remember driving home that first day with just the windshield, no roof, no seatbelts, unfortunately. And it was like I was sold. Like that. Cars should be fun like this.
Yeah.
Even though it was slow, it was awful. You could see the floor, the ground through the floorboards. The oil smoke would come up through the floor and choke you out occasionally, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
So fast forward to present day, and you've done the calculations. You're a data guy.
I am.
How many vehicles have you owned?
Okay, so in 24 years, which is my car ownership history,
Mhm.
there have been 28 vehicles crossed through here.
Okay.
That includes two parts cars, which were both cars, so I figured they count.
They count.
And it only count. I have one car I bought twice, but it only counts once in the count
Okay.
because I actually bought one, sold it, and then bought it back a couple years later.
So that is one. How many cars per year? It's 1.0 something cars per year.
Yeah, well, so
I didn't do the math on that.
I did not on that one, but there have only
Oh.
been 5 years that I have not bought or sold a vehicle,
Wow.
and there's only been 1 2-year stretch.
How
in
did
that
those years
24 years.
feel emotionally?
I think at least in one of them I was obviously broke.
Okay.
Going back to that, I was definitely broke in that year.
Okay.
2002 is the year I got married.
Okay.
So
Well,
that would be I was
for
trying to
obvious
be
purposes.
thoughtful there.
Yeah.
In fact, the following year, that was the one gap. The first 2 years I was married, I didn't buy
Okay.
or sell
And so you
anything.
wanted to like ease her in.
Yes.
Kind of like to the situation in a.
Yeah.
You didn't want to surprise her.
Yeah, and even that first sell after we got married was actually one of my few practical moves because I had a Subaru Outback with a stick, and my wife does not drive manual transmissions.
Okay.
So I traded that for a Hyundai Accent with an automatic.
Oh, that didn't feel good, did it?
That is actually the daily driver I've owned the longest.
Really?
It was the most honest car I've ever owned.
Yeah.
It was a cheap little shitbox.
Yeah.
It's all it ever was. I used to joke when I went to a gig, I probably tripled its value, and no one was going to steal it.
Yeah.
So I could put a $5,000 of gear in the back of it, and no one would know.
Yeah.
Awesome in the snow.
Really?
Oh yeah, no power and tiny, skinny little tires.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
just
right.
cut right through.
Just cut right through. It was
Right.
awesome.
Right.
Yeah, I still sold it to a friend of mine.
Who's probably still driving it.
He actually did finally get rid of it. His son called it Dad's lousy little car.
I remember that car, but let's take us. So your wife is a saint.
Yes, she is.
And I have to say, I appreciate that you have done what you've done, mainly because then I can use it with my wife. I can be like, well, honey, this is car 21. Drew's going on car 25. But for our listeners, you gave me some invaluable advice. After I made some somewhat dumb moves by selling my wife's cars from underneath her,
Which is how I feel better, and I use that as my I've got 28 cars, but I've never sold your car.
exactly.
Yeah.
So. And tell the listeners, what is that advice?
Well, one of the advices, it was actually advice a friend of mine gave me he was collecting one of every MG model made after World War II.
That's a good move.
It was a serious thing. And so his people would ask, how can you pull that off? And his advice was, I never say no. If my wife wants something, I work to make it happen. So that when I want something, we're good. So my rule is I never touch my wife's cars. They're not included in my count of cars. She has a parking space in the garage all the time. I take care of her car, so she's good because she's not a car person. She's on, I think, her third or fourth car since I've known her. In the same stretch, I've had 28. So I leave her space alone, and she's good with mine. Yeah, that's just it.
Do you have to factor in though, in the budget, if she says to you tomorrow, hey, I'm thinking I want something new, or I saw this and I'm thinking this, is that going to factor into what what you're planning on in the near future, or
Not really, because I'm being also a numbers guy. Of course, I have a family budget because I am that nerd. I am in fact that guy.
It's okay.
So even though our cars are currently paid off, we're still making car payments to ourselves for both of our daily drivers.
Right,
So
right.
at some point when she keeps generally cars about 7-8 years. So when she's ready to buy something new, she gets what she wants. I mean, she has a Buick Encore right now, which she loves. Not a car I would have chosen, but I like it because she likes it. She actually noticed them on the road and said, "That looks good. I'd like one of those." So we test drove a bunch of things, and that's what she picked, and off we go.
happy wife, happy life.
It's not my decision. That's her space.
Right.
Because she doesn't want anything to do with what I drive.
So this podcast goes beyond just car talk. It goes to life advice.
This is marital
counseling
advice. Yeah, I'd like to note for the record, I am not married, and I don't know what that says about me other than, well, I don't know what it says.
I'm sure.
Difficult to get along with, maybe.
I'm not sure why my
Lousy taste in
wife
women?
hasn't left me for my automotive indiscretions. But love you, babe. Please don't leave.
Shout out to the wives.
Yay.
Well, it's always part of finding your balance, and then because if you find your balance, you can find ways to do the things you want to do.
That's some Zen advice right
Yeah,
there.
that's namaste shit right there.
But this is also how you wind up having owned 28 cars.
Yeah. So what has been of the 28, what has been your favorite car of all of those? What would you say?
So I have some numbers to back this up.
Okay.
So, and it actually happens to line up correctly. So I was curious. So 28 cars.
Wait, so you're using numbers just to determine what your favorite,
Well,
like,
I was curious to see how it balanced out.
I'm-
But yes, I do sort of think in matrix code.
so do you experience love? Like,
I do write songs. So,
okay. All right. I'm sorry.
Although I admit that,
being a
and
bit of a
Zach,
jerk,
you
sorry.
will appreciate this as a fellow musician, that yes, I write songs, but most of my instrumentals are usually in 5 or 7 or odd
Okay.
time signatures.
Yeah.
Just to make you think about the math.
Yeah, I understand that.
So I've had, it's 28 cars from 17 different brands.
Okay.
So the only car I've actually owned, the brand I've owned the most is MG. I've had 4 of those.
Mm-hmm.
2 of those were parts cars.
Okay.
So if you back those out, I've only ever owned 2 of any brand. But and I've never owned a car longer than 5 years.
Okay.
Most have been 1 year. The average is 2.18 years per car. Per
Okay.
vehicle, I should say, because this counts motorcycles as well.
Okay.
The 2 cars I've owned 5 years, both Austin Healey Bug Eye Sprites.
One of which you still own.
One of which I still own.
is still out in the garage.
So
right?
by sometime next year, that will now be the vehicle I've owned the longest.
Wow.
Also, incidentally, both of those cars were off the road for most of my ownership.
Oh.
Because I was in the middle of a restoration or something, and that takes substantially longer than you ever think it takes.
Yeah, for sure.
Years.
For sure.
Unless that's your dedicated thing. And as I said, I'm also playing gigs and trying to, see my wife occasionally so she will continue to be with me.
Okay.
So
Not just leave.
the Bug Eye would be your favorite.
I think so. Like if I had to go back through all of those cars and just keep one of them as a fun car, there's something about them that just speaks to me. Even though I'm really way too big for them, they're silly little things, but
Right.
it's the most fun I've ever had driving.
Okay.
No question. Because they're lightweight. You can work on them. There's like 3 wires and 2 moving parts.
Yeah.
And super simple, and they just look cool.
Well, that's the good thing about those old cars too, is that anything older than, I don't know, anything carbureted, the complexity is so much lower. There's some everything so computer driven now. I know it's kind of like a trope to complain about it, but fixing a car now is a different proposition than it was.
Very much so. I mean, I take my daily driver is a 2011 Nissan Xterra. I take it to the dealer for oil changes.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with it. I take it to someone else who knows what they're doing. But I've learned to do everything on my cars. The only thing I haven't done yet is rebuild an engine or a transmission.
Yeah.
And that's next.
Yeah.
But I've done brakes, suspension. I don't do body work because I'm not anywhere near good enough to do something like that yet.
Probably specialized tools there as well, I would think.
And a real desire to spend hours and hours sanding.
Yeah.
And I have a job.
no
I can
fun.
pay someone to sand.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm comfortable with that first world problem there that I can.
Yeah, probably negative. I don't know. You get into the safety gear of it too. It's like that's another ball of wax.
Worth every penny having someone else do it.
So the Sprite is number 1.
Yeah, as far as truly of all the cars, that would be the one I
that
would
be the one.
keep.
Which of the cars that you've owned have you loved the least?
That was a Kia Forte. It was a great car. Actually, pretty nice looking, designed by the same guy who designed the Audi A3 at the same time. Looked remarkably similar. It was black. It was nice. It was boring. It was just boring. Like it wasn't particularly cheap. like my Hyundai Accent was. Its saving grace is it didn't cost anything.
The
So,
Forte's, like, I get confused. That's just a sedan, right?
this was a hatchback.
It was a hatch?
I've
Okay.
only actually owned one sedan, and that's my Morris Minor.
Oh.
Because I play upright bass.
Yeah, right.
And every daily driver I own has to fit an upright bass in it. So that's
a criteria most people probably don't think about, but an important one.
I've showed up at car dealerships
With your bass.
with the bass, because if it doesn't fit, I can't take it home.
Well,
so the Kia was just a non-car, and I owned that one for a year and a half or 2 years. And it was a new car, and it traded in on a Jeep Wrangler because it was just not.
You just didn't have a soul.
No.
Didn't have.
No, it was. I mean, super good car. I would recommend one if you had the killer used deals, because Hyundai and Kias have lousy, resale value. So they're awesome used cars, but they're just meh.
But looking at that car, I'm fast forwarding to the present. Have you looked at any of the new Kias? Like, what are your thoughts on some of the design styling of the newer stuff?
So when it comes down to it, there are two. I was thinking about this because I figured you guys would ask. There are two new cars that I would buy today. The Morgan three-wheeler,
yeah,
which is technically a new car. I know, but
it's
it's
wooden frame still, though, right?
Wooden frame, 3 wheels, and a Jeep JL Wrangler. Because I had a JK Wrangler, loved it.
Would you do? This is an argument we had on the last show: 2 or 4-door.
I had a 2-door, which I really liked. It does eventually get annoying if you do have to have passengers with you.
Yep.
If you don't get because I kept the back seat for my JK was in our basement the entire time I owned it, because I had to fit an upright bass in it, which do fit.
It does fit. Yeah.
Just
lean the seat.
Lean
back.
the seat, tuck it through,
Yeah.
angle it.
Yeah.
It works well. If I was buying one today, I would do a 4-door, and I would put an Ursa Minor pop-up top on it so I could camp in it. So it's part of why I own the Xterra, is it's long enough that I can sleep in it. So if I go down the desert, I want to do like scouting camping, changing every night, I don't want to have to set a tent up. So I want something I can sleep in, and I'm 6'1". So
that's a great reason for
I
that.
think a true Jeep is still this classic 2-door, but I totally understand the 4-door.
The functionality.
And if you're going to, like I'm not really a rock crawler off-road. I'm a more overlander kind of style. And for doing that, you need the space. You just carry more gear. You need more space. And like I said, I want to be able to sleep in or on the vehicle, and that's tough to do in a 2-door.
Beyond that being a car that, you can realistically own, let's just shoot for the stars here. Money was no object. Tomorrow, what would you pick up?
Okay. One of two base vehicles for this, either a 70 series Land Cruiser, Troopy, to set up as an overland vehicle.
Okay.
Or a 45 series Troopy Land Cruiser, which was made in the 70s and 80s. Similar thing, long wheelbase FJ40. Send it off to Icon out in California and have them spend, a couple $100,000 doing the full kit out with the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because really, I was thinking about, there's truly no new car I would care about at all.
Really?
No.
So you wouldn't
Boring.
want like an Aston Martin,
Nope.
like the
Too fussy. I don't want to. The only modern-ish sort of sports car, exotic car I would buy would be a Porsche. I have a 911, because that's a car you can use. A good friend of mine down in Las Vegas, he bought a 996 turbo with 100,000 miles on it, and it's a rock solid car. He could put another 100,000 miles on it with, maybe some top end work, a few things. He actually now works as a Porsche mechanic, so smart man.
Yeah.
But it's a car you can drive.
Well, speaking of rock solid cars, British cars, which are your thing, are not known to be the most reliable. Why British? Why what drew you to British cars?
Well, so two things. One is, for some strange reason, even when I was a kid, when I'd make my little Lego cars, they come with sets, you have little Lego guys, I would take the guy out of the center and make him right-hand drive. I have no idea why. Truly no. I mean, my family's British roots. My grandfather was born in England. The Frink side of my family does ultimately come from England, so there is some family connection, but it's distant.
So, you have a genetic connection to right-hand drive cars, is what you're saying?
It's entirely possible.
Yeah, it's like something deep down on a chromosomal level made you just want to sit on that side.
Or maybe I just wanted to do something different. I don't know. So I've always had this sort of right-hand drive thing, and then my grandmother's second husband, who was a longtime family friend, he had an MG TD that he had. I had thought it was restored. It was actually original, that it had belonged to my aunt's roommate in college in the 60s, and she had moved off to France somewhere and sold it to him, and he just had it all this time. Unfortunately, when they needed to sell it, I was just out of college and broke. So off it went, which is fine so I had a bit of that touch in there, and then I was always my first car I wanted 65 Mustang. Like that's when I was a kid. Of course, I think 80s mullet, whole thing.
You had a mullet?
I had a mullet.
Fierce one, huh?
You're from Ohio, right?
I'm from Rhode Island. I am full Yankee.
Oh.
Full hardcore Yankee, born and raised.
And they had mullets there, huh?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a guy in my high school drive to school in a tractor. So I was sort of rural. Where it is now is much more suburban. But when I was, way back when I was there, very rural. So we were Camaros and IROCs and Mustangs.
Yeah, I was going to say the IROC. This is the second episode in a row we've mentioned.
Oh yeah, no, that was the I am a child of the 80s.
You know what IROC stands for?
International Race of Champions.
See?
He knows it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Had this conversation with Sam today. Sam didn't know.
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah, so I wanted Mustangs. Like that was like 66, 65 first gen Mustang. Still liked the look. And then I drove one. And it wasn't much to drive, really. It felt huge. And
I've never driven one. I need Mustang.
I mean, I need to drive another one. I need to drive a good one. Because, when you're shopping on the low end of the budget, you're driving battle cans. You're not driving good ones.
You've never owned a Mustang.
I've never owned a Mustang. Although the only American brands I've owned are Ford and Jeep. I had 2 Fords and 1 Jeep.
And remind us what the Fords were. I don't know if you.
So I had the Ford Escort wagon.
That's right.
And and honestly, truly my worst car, I had a Ford Aerostar van that I bought to go on the road with a band.
Yeah.
And it went through 2 transmissions and 2 engines.
Jesus.
In like a couple of years. It was the single worst vehicle
they
I've
did
ever
not
owned.
win the minivan battle.
No.
I had a 91 Ford Tempo for a while that was easily the worst car I've ever had. It was like a 3-speed automatic transmission that maybe, when you're going 70, you thought you were going to die.
Yeah, that was my van was from that same generation of Ford. It was not
good. Not doing good things at that point.
But the new Mustang,
the Bullet is the one that I like.
I haven't driven the new one, but boy, all the reviews, and then when they left the live rear axle and went to independent rear suspension, they finally were taken seriously by Europe and everybody else. So
yeah, they're nice looking cars. They're just, for my taste, they're too big and too heavy.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Lightweight stuff. So yeah. So I was on this quest to get a Mustang. Like finally, Jenny and I got married. We bought a house with a garage. I'm like, sweet, I can finally save up and buy myself an old car. Always wanted a Mustang. Bought a little Mustang Matchbox to put on my desk to keep me motivated. And I still have it. It's over on my shelf over there somewhere in my collection of old Matchbox cars. And then one afternoon, doing nothing, and Jenny read in the local paper down there, hey, there's this British car show. Go have some fun, look around. And that day changed my life. As I looked down and saw these cars, like, these things are cool. Yeah. And then I looked at the prices and like, these things are cheap.
Yeah.
Because that's part of what I always liked about the British motor industry is they were building cars for the regular people.
Yeah.
Because even the Jag was a deal compared to a Ferrari. It was, at the time, it was, the E-Type was basically as fast as many of the Ferraris at the time. Not all of them, but
and a gorgeous car to boot.
A gorgeous car. And it was expensive, but it was not Ferrari expensive. You could potentially attain one if you had a decent job and saved a little. It wasn't, you didn't have to be a Rockefeller to go there. And I always liked that about MG and Austin Healey and Lotus, even to some extent, and Triumph, is that they were cars that regular folks could aspire to. It wasn't some pie in the sky, like your modern McLaren, Ferrari. And now Porsche is now something that's, a 911's $100,000.
Another stratosphere.
Yeah, it might as well be $1 million for those of us with regular jobs. Yeah. In most cases.
Is Jaguar on the list? Do you see that ever being a car?
No, I'm kind of stuck on I'm kind of in this. I think like every other, once you get in to old cars, most of us, I think, will tend to specialize in a brand or a general, because the engineering becomes similar. The parts get shared.
Right.
The engineering philosophy behind the cars gets similar. So it's like, oh, I can work on this because I know how this goes. It's just 10% bigger. Whereas, I had an old 73 BMW motorcycle, R75/5. And at the same time, I had a Sprite and an MG. And boy, the engineering philosophy was way different. You could just tell different people thought differently when they put these things together. And that confuses my brain. So I'm better off just because my MG and my Healey and my Morris, all made by the same people.
Yeah. Well, when you say British and you say shave weight, Lotus is the first thing that comes to mind, right?
Absolutely.
That was
their
their mantra, right?
Yeah. Simplicate and add lightness.
Yeah, right.
And they had stuff that's even lighter because my lightest car is the Bug-Eye, and it's about just under 1,500 pounds.
Yeah.
I ran one across the truck scale once, 1480 full of gas.
Wow.
Which is, and I'm not a great driver, I'm nothing special, but I could tell the difference. That's probably a third of the weight of my Nissan, of my truck, if that. And boy, you get zipping around, and you don't have to go very fast to have fun.
Well, that's another one of my favorite Drewisms is it's more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow.
Yeah, right.
I've had enough speeding tickets. I don't need any more. Where I can take the Sprite or the MG up over the Alpine Loop, which is a great local road here that's super tight, and you feel like you are just driving the Targa Florio. You are going all to the wall, and you're maybe going 40, maybe on the straights.
Right.
But you are using every ounce of what you have, every bit of momentum, and you're not going to get arrested. You might get a ticket. Because I've had motorcycles where I've gone like over some local roads here, and I'm realizing I'm going over the top of some of these passes at death speeds, and the bike's going, "Come on,
yeah,
you can do more. Come on."
Yeah,
and that's how you die.
Definitely.
yeah. And I've got the scars to prove it. So.
And you got to get 28 more cars in there. I mean, so you can't leave us anytime soon.
Well, we're sort of slowing down now.
Yeah.
I think I like the ones I have, and I have no intention of at this point. I mean, no one believes me, and fair enough. But
so at this point, you're thinking more like work on the projects you have rather than.
Yeah, if I could actually, a good friend of mine recently, the big whatever Mega Millions lottery was up to $1 billion.
Yeah, I bought a ticket. I'll confess, I bought a ticket.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I contemplated it.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine asked me, like, hey, if you won this credit amount, what would be the first car you'd buy? And I said, I would fix the ones I have, and that would probably take care of all the money I have. Like, if I could just get what I have all working. Although I have one more in mind. There's at least a 29th ready to slot in at some point.
Go on.
Well, it goes back to the Land Cruiser thing.
Okay.
I can't afford to have Jonathan Ward over at Icon. If you guys aren't familiar with him and that thing, you should go check him out.
Well, yeah, we'll check that out. We'll
try
to get a link on the site.
They do amazing stuff. He runs two companies, one called TLC, which is one of the oldest Toyota Land Cruiser shops, parts and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Icon was his design world where he just wanted to do some crazy things. Worth checking out. But they're like $250,000, $300,000 restorations. It's crazy stuff. But for maybe $20,000, I could get a nice old Land Cruiser and relive my days. And I just love them. So that's the fourth slot. I haven't gotten past the wife eye rolls on that one yet.
So the Land Cruiser, not the Land Rover.
Probably Land Cruiser. They're a little more durable, and they have a little more space. As I've commented, I'm not a small guy, and Land Rovers are tight. They're narrow, and the seats don't go very far. So I'm not sure I can drive one comfortably because I want to use it. I want to take it down to the Utah desert and explore. I don't want to show thing because I'm not a personal fan of show cars.
Yeah,
I use everything I have.
Yeah, I'm with you on that philosophy. I don't necessarily like the idea of garaging cars and just parking it. I think that's how I had a friend who had a WS6, a Pontiac Trans Am WS6, the big V8.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Pontiac guy, and he had it on the road, and it was just like getting it was getting daily driven. So he got to a point where he was tired of like just dealing with like. He loved the car so much. He's like, I'm going to park it, man. And I was like, if you do that, man, you're never going to drive it again. And he didn't. He bought something else that was like a Camaro because that's what he wanted for his daily driver, a newer Camaro. And like this beautiful WS6 just sat in a closet somewhere. I don't know. I don't know. It's not my thing. I don't dig it. Like cars are made to be driven. Machines are made to be used is my sort of philosophy.
Yeah, I'm with you. I can understand if you have a particular, like in that case, I could see you've got an emotional attachment to something. Just having it in your life is an enjoyment. Great.
Yeah.
But I'm the same way with instruments. I have a bunch of them now because I play a bunch of things. I don't really have any I have just to have.
Right.
I'm not a collector. I use everything I have. There's a purpose for it.
Right.
And I'm the same way with cars. I'm stupidly picky about them. I mean, I sold my first Bug Eye because it was left-hand drive. Now you can convert them with like 2 parts in an afternoon. It's not hard to do. But the original right-hand drive ones have a different VIN. They don't have an L in the VIN. That's the only difference. That's it. So I sold a perfectly running car with like a $6,000 race engine build that was beautiful to buy the same car again that I didn't have to put a lot of money into because it didn't have an L in it.
So like,
Sybil?
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned having bought a car sold and bought a car. Well,
Yeah.
I guess you sold
Bought
it
it,
once.
sold it, bought it back.
I bought it back.
Tell us that story.
Tell us that story,
So
because
it's
you're
the
the
ol-
only person I've ever known that's done that.
It's the only car I've ever regretted selling
Okay.
out of the 28 of them. So I had bought this one as my first right-hand drive car, MGB. Great car to drive. But I'm a bug-eye guy. Like that's really wanted to have one. So I was able to track down. I was kind of hunting for another right-hand drive bug-eye at some point. One came along out in California, made the deal, brought it home. This is a full restoration project. And I'm not really a restorer. This is the only car I will ever restore.
Okay.
Because I don't really like restoration work. I love mechanical work, but restoration is...
It's a different ball of wax.
It's everything. It's
Yeah,
every
it's-
piece of thing. And your years without driving your car.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. So like, I need to focus. So I had a Moto Guzzi motorcycle at the time, and a V7. So I was like, I'll sell the MG.
Yeah.
I get the bike to ride in the time, focus on the Sprite. We'll stay focused.
Yeah.
It was the logical thing to do.
Yeah.
You should never, we were having this discussion earlier, you should never make an emotional decision with logic. So I sold the car to a good friend of mine who lives up in Ogden and regretted it almost immediately.
Yeah.
Wasn't going to say anything because he was happy and like more happy that he was happy that like, great, I can live with it. Fortunately, he had some trouble with the clutch and wasn't driving it. I think had he been like just loving it, using it, I never would have even mentioned it to him that I would buy it back. But it was kind of sitting and he was kind of struggling with what was he going to do with it. So I'm like, if you ever want to sell it back, I will buy it back for what I paid for it.
Right.
And about a week later, he emailed me and said, let's do the deal.
Yeah.
So, and Jen, who's been my wife, who's been very understanding through this, even she knew that when this came up, I had to do it. I didn't really want to have 3 cars, to be perfectly honest, at once, but,
Well,
but she was understanding I've got an opportunity, and she knew I had always regretted selling it. So bought it back, and I think it's here to stay. So
That's a cool story of just the connection of a friend, a car.
Yeah.
Speaking of connections, talk a little bit about like the British Car Club in Utah. Like, what's that look like? How many members? Like activity? What's it like?
So I'm not normally a club guy. I'll be perfectly honest. I have the same image, and I think of your comment from the last podcast I listened to about the cars and coffee with the guys with the vinyl jackets with the whole things. And just kind of thinking of that weird scene.
It's a scene of people. Yeah.
It's a scene of people that's not normally my thing. Part of why I like riding motorcycles. It's something you do by yourself.
Yeah. Right.
But I got connected in with the British Motor Club of Utah, bmcutah.org. I'll throw that pitch out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give them a shout out.
So
get that a link on the website too.
Yeah.
Yep.
So early on, just because I was interested in these cars, I needed to find people who knew about them. So they were the ones who'd put this show on that I went to see. It's called British Field Day, which still goes on, by the way. And there's this super good group of people. I think I've still showed up to events more often in something other than a British car, and nobody cares.
Are you generally the youngest person there when you show up?
I'm pretty close to it, yeah.
Yeah. You bring the average age down by a good 10 years just by showing up there.
There's a handful of us who are the young guys in our 40s.
Right. Right.
Lots of those folks have were into the cars when they were new.
Right.
One of the guys has a long history out at Bonneville. He's been an announcer out at Speed Week for years and years and used to do SCCA racing. He's actually owned more cars than us. He said he counted up. He's well over 100.
Wow.
But then he also used to buy them, fix them up, sell them. So he actually like made money on them, which is, gets out of our realm. But they're super good group of people. We do drives in season, once a month somewhere. Our only bylaws are we will have as few meetings as possible, and all events will include food. And that's it.
That's a good set of rules.
And no dues. So there's no dues. Oh, and also we don't do judged car shows. Like we are a driving club. It's come out. If you like British cars, there's no membership. Anyone can be. There's no you don't have to sign a thing. You just
I imagine there's not a lot of like hubris to that either, right? I mean, are they pretty like down to earth people?
Very down to earth. I mean, we're driving cars that could break at any moment.
You got to have a group of friends.
Yeah, you got a group of friends, but we will help each other out. I've gotten parts from people. We've helped each other on the road. We have a great picture of me somewhere down in Boulder, Utah, because the exhaust had fallen off my MG, and I'm lying on the ground wiring it back up again with help from people around. But we also use the car, so we'll do drives around, and once a year we do a long tour. We were in Grand Junction, Colorado.
Okay.
This past year, we've gone to Moab, to Torrey, to Colorado. So we do a long weekend where we put 700 miles in the cars and use them.
Yeah.
So it's a driving group. We do as little sitting around as possible and as much driving as possible.
Let's say if you were a guy that wanted to buy an MG, Just hypothetically saying, would that be a good group of people to reach out to?
It would be a very good group of people to reach out to. That's what I did when I started. Is I said, hey, I'm interested in. At the time, I even knew I like bug eyes. I like Triumph TR3s.
Yeah.
I like that kind of look. So I started going to the meetings, meeting people, chatting, and then you start to learn. The other good place I use is called the British Car Forum.
Okay.
I've got BritishCarForum.com. That's one of the big British car forums.
Yeah.
And it's one I like because it is moderated.
So
it is
good.
We
the
talk,
stupid comments stay.
We talk to cars. We keep everything else out of it. I mean, I've gotten to know the guy who runs the site real well. He and I are very diametrically opposed politically, and we get along great.
Yeah.
Because we talk about cars.
Yeah.
So between
everything else aside.
there are other places for that. This is for cars. Full disclosure, I am a moderator on the Sprite and MG forums there just to keep things clean. But it's the designers talk about cars. I've had people from that forum inspect cars I've been buying from a distance. I mean, my MG actually came out of Canada, and there was a guy who lived an hour away who drove over and took pictures and looked it over for me and made sure it was what was expected.
Did you send him like a case of beer or something?
Yeah, and there were some extra parts that came with the car that I didn't need, so we kept them. And I've had a friend in California looked at my bug eye for me before I got down there, because it's always best to have someone who knows the mark.
Yeah,
look at them. Because I had a generic company inspect my Morris, and they missed a couple of key things, like the fact that the transmission was installed wrong.
That seems like a big thing.
It was wedged up against the steering rack.
Ooh.
So I fixed it.
That's not normal.
It was expensive, but it was not normal. But yeah, so if you have a club near you and you're interested in this stuff, get a hold of folks.
Yeah.
I think especially with British cars, you always have to have a sense of humor, and it's really hard to feel pretentious when you're driving a car with rust holes in it that could die at any moment.
Yeah.
It's hard you lose that fast with these cars.
You have to.
But the thing is, when they work, they're amazing.
Yeah.
They're so much fun. And I would argue they're not unreliable. They are maintenance intensive. That you have to pay attention to them.
I'm going to start using that line. Honey, we need to get this car. It's not unreliable. It's maintenance intensive.
Yeah.
Well, Drew, thank you for taking time out to talk to us.
Always happy to be among car people where I can talk cars and people's eyes don't glaze over.
Yeah, no, you're among friends. Don't feel weird.
Yes, it's nice. Yeah, same reason I'm in a club, because we can go and talk carburetors and things, and everyone's excited about it rather than going, oh my God, not again. So, all right, so now we have to gird up back up for the regular world now. But it's been a pleasure to be here and to be part of this, some car
Absolutely.
discussion.
Thank you so much.
And happy motoring.
Happy motoring.
Well, as our friends Click and Clack would say, you squandered another half an hour of your life away listening to the Lugnuts Podcast. If you do enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and tell a friend. And if you'd like to be a guest on our show, send us an email at lugnutspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks, and have a great day.